Well, join me now to discuss the impeachment testimony, Democratic Representative Ami Bera, the chair of the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations on the Foreign Affairs Committee. With a big welcome to you, sir. What's your reaction to this whole quid pro quo argument?
Well, Alex, thanks for having me on. You know, what the public will hear next week with Ambassador Taylor, Kent, and Yovanovitch is very definite quid pro quo. But, yeah, this was a president who, withheld funding because he wanted information and, on a political rival. And that just can't happen in America.
So do you buy what Rand Paul was saying, which is, look, every president does quid pro quo. It's part of politics.
This wasn't appropriate. This was working outside of the bounds of the checks and balances in our Constitution and government. Remember, Congress appropriated these funds to protect an ally that is in an active war. The president made a decision to withhold these funds. We don't have to guess at that because his acting chief of staff publicly was pretty candid with us and said they withheld the funds. So, that can't happen.
Okay, and Rand Paul, pretty much admitted it as well, we should say. But I know that you attended some of the closed-door depositions in the impeachment inquiry. So what can you tell our viewers to expect that they will hear now that this testimony goes public?
Well, what they're going to hear is from career folks that have served our country in a patriotic way, from Ambassador Taylor, who's a West Point graduate, a Vietnam War veteran, someone who loves this country and knows and has served as Ukraine previously under the Bush administration. So this is not a political person. He expressed some reservations about actually coming back in, but it was Secretary of State Pompeo that asked him to come back in after they dismissed Marie Yovanovitch. You'll hear from Ambassador Yovanovitch, another career Foreign Service officer who has faithfully served this country, about everything she had to deal with, including Rudy Giuliani. And then you'll hear from Ambassador Kent, who also will corroborate some of this. The one name that keeps coming up is Rudolph Giuliani. And this is a person, he's not a government employee. He's someone who is operating outside the bounds of, the checks and balances in our Constitution.
I'd like you to take a listen to what the former ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, said about this inquiry. Take a listen.
Do you think ultimately the president will be impeached and removed from office?
No. On what? You're going to impeach a president for asking for a favor that didn't happen and giving money and it wasn't withheld? I don't know what you would impeach him on. And look, Nora, impeachment is like the death penalty for a public official. When you look at the transcript, there's nothing in that transcript that warrants the death penalty for the president.
To her point about the death penalty, she's 100% right. But the rest of it, I mean, with a politician, you get impeached, and it is the death penalty professionally. But the rest of it, what are your thoughts?
She didn't exonerate the president. She said, when you look at the transcript, she doesn't think it's impeachable. That'll be up to the public. That'll be up to us as we go through this public phase of the hearing. Every member of the House will have a chance to review the transcripts, hear the testimony, and then my assumption is we'll draw up articles of impeachment and the whole House will vote. Now, what worries me is when it goes over to the Senate, when you listen to senators like Lindsey Graham, it sounds like they've already made up their mind. They're not an impartial jury here, and that's unfortunate.
How about the people in this country, though? When we look at this public support for impeaching the president, it goes up and then it goes down slightly. But do you think once the public hearings begin, do you expect support for impeachment to go back up again?
I think when the public hears the testimony and sees folks like Ambassador Taylor, Lieutenant Colonel Vindeman, I think they will understand and recognize what the president did was inappropriate and probably out of bounds of our Constitution. Now, will they believe that rises to obstruction of justice, that rises to abuse of power? That'll be determined in how we present the case, but also how the case plays out in the Senate.
I'm curious about those that have been called to testify but have not yet complied to do so. Is there any chance in your mind, many of whom have been issued subpoenas, that we will see some of them come forward during this public phase?
I would hope so, because if we, in fact, do move into articles of impeachment and an impeachment hearing, not an inquiry, at that juncture, this is about as serious as it gets. I would hope there are a lot of folks in the cabinet that know a lot. You know, we know John Bolton's attorney has said he knows a lot. You know, we'd want Mick Mulvaney to come forward. We'd want the access to the documents that we've been requesting. Now, again, this is about as serious as it gets. So I would hope the president doesn't compound his obstruction of justice by continuing to refuse to allow folks to come forward.
All right. California Democratic Congressman Bera, thanks so much for your time. We'll see you again.